Hello, Oklahoma Sooners fans and college football fans, into another edition of Oklahoma Sooners Live here on Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football. I'm your host, Josh Mahler. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Real Josh Mahler, to keep up with the show and so much more over there. Welcome in. Just a quick reminder for everyone who is watching on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. If you're watching over there, the show will come off of X. It will be completely kicked off to the curb. It'll be completely shut down at 7:15. So jump over on YouTube real quick. That's the best way to help this channel grow. Jump over to YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's go ahead and get into it, because I'm going to be talking about some of the biggest question marks for the Oklahoma Sooners and things that they'll have to answer in 2025. Again, it's this prediction season. It's this talk about what's to come type of season. And so we're going to talk about that, and then also kind of predicting the depth chart for the Oklahoma Sooners, going down the depth chart and kind of predicting what we might see. It kind of gives us an idea. I've heard several others doing this. I've seen others doing this. It was just on another show, the JP Trav show with JP and Travis Davidson was over on their show, and we kind of went through the depth chart. And so this was something that kind of intrigued me. I was like, yeah, let's go down through there, because I think everyone kind of has their own opinion about who might be higher on the depth chart over someone else, especially when it comes down to maybe rooms like the running back room where it's very deep. But anyways, we're going to get into all of this. Make sure to follow this show on social media. You can follow it Oklahoma VOCFB on X, Instagram. Check us out over there. That's another great way to help support the show. Jump in that live chat. Again, if you're on X, jump over to YouTube to jump in the live chat, because X will be going away. Around 7:15, we'll boot X from the stream, and then we will only be here. But anyways, we're going to get into it. Make sure to join this channel again on Thursday. We'll be doing our live call-in show as well. That way I can hear from you guys directly. But for now, jump in that live chat. All donations and super chats will be read live on the show. But let's get into it, guys. Kind of talking and diving down the biggest questions for 2025. And I want to start on the offensive side of the ball, because obviously that's the one that we have most questions about. I think Oklahoma fans, when they look back at last season and the disaster that it was, that entire season was just like I said, it was a disaster. It was horrible last season. There wasn't really anything good that you could take from last season, other than the fact that some younger guys got some reps at certain positions. I think your offensive line and your wide receiver, they got the most reps there. And that's the only good thing that you can take from that. But that's not good, because that means that your veteran guys, the guys that you wanted to be in those roles, they weren't out there on the field. Those guys that you needed to perform to get you at the next level, they weren't able to be there. And so that's something that I think you look back at last season on the offense, and there's a lot of optimism going into this season, because it wasn't as if what happened last season was only because of coaching. There is also a lot of other things that went around it. And then, of course, the coaching that we did disagree with as fans, we can look at from the outside and say that a lot of that has been resolved. A lot of that has been changed, at least, maybe not resolved, but I guess time will tell. But there's so much, of course, with guys like John Mateer and Jaden Ott in backfield. That's the biggest one leading the charge. I think Javonte Gibson is another guy that a lot of Oklahoma fans have warmed up to, even though they kind of didn't really care so much about where he came from. But you know, that's you look at what they've done in the transfer portal, of course, on the offensive line as well. You've got a lot of optimism going into the season. I think that's what Oklahoma fans are banking in on, and hoping that it's going to get better, because we've seen what the Sooners have done in the offseason. And of course, that's what I want to kind of get into. Some of the question marks, the things that were wrong last season, the things that went wrong last season, and how we view them going into this season. And first, starting on the offensive line and kind of thinking about what could be on the offensive line, I think the thing that I look at with the most optimism going into 2025 with the offensive line is that there's really no spots that are locked. There's no spots that are locked in. You know what the starting lineup is. And this might be the biggest question mark I have on the entire Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to get into the depth charts later, but when you look at the depth chart for each position group, this is the one that I have the biggest question marks for the Oklahoma Sooners, because you really don't know where they stand. You've got a lot of newer guys. You've got some guys that are younger and eager, ready to get into those roles. I think you've got projected leaders, guys like Troy Everett, who's a senior. He's got the most experience out of anyone on that offensive line. You've also got Fabechi Wiwu, who started, I believe, every game last season, fought through a lot where everyone else was getting injured. And that was a guy that you look at. So, I mean, you've got some leaders in that group, but you really don't know who is going to be keyed in as the starters right now because it's so wide open. And it's also an offensive line that a season ago, again, you had so many injuries and so many question marks about guys because of their injuries going into this season. So you've got a lot of competition right now. I think that's a thing to look at as a good thing because you've got competition with guys that I think if you were to go through and look at the metrics, look at what you can on paper, and look at the statistics, you feel good about the competition that's there because you've got two guys in just about every position group that you could swap in and out and feel pretty good about either one of them, at least two guys. And I really think that there's some that go down into the third and fourth string where you really feel good about no matter who it is at that position, you really feel like you can make something happen. Or if it doesn't work out so well with one guy at one position, that you could swap him around specifically in that offensive line. And of course, I think a lot of it comes down to injury because again, Oklahoma fans are extremely worried about that because they had that long list every week that would come out and it would just show up like a really long grocery list. You've got to go stock up for the Super Bowl party. And that's the kind of list you've got for the offensive line every week. And so, not only the offensive line, but then, of course, other position groups. But I think specifically talking about the offensive line and the question marks that you had there, Oklahoma fans are worried about that. And of course, I think a lot of us are paying attention to the message boards and seeing what comes out. We're paying attention to all the news because we're just worried with fall camp starting here in just a few days, less than a week away. Oklahoma fans are worried. What's happening as far as the injury room? And I will get to some of that here in just a little bit in terms of who there are injury concerns around. Right now, it seems healthy. So knock on wood, let's keep it that way because Oklahoma fans, again, we're watching out for that. But as far as the competition goes, with health pushed to the side, as long as everyone could stay healthy, you feel good about the competition at hand, specifically on that offensive line. I think there's a lot of competition. You start off at the center position with guys like Troy Everett. I think even Jake Mikula, I think that he adds a little bit of competition in that room just because of his experience at Stanford the last 2 years. Started at least 13 games in the last couple of years. And, that's a guy, again, you feel good about either one of them coming in and stepping into that role, specifically because of the, and I feel like I'm saying specifically a lot, but, a lot to do with the metrics that you see from both those guys, how big they are, how strong they are, what you've seen in some of the growth in this offseason. And then again, the seniority that you get with both of those guys, the experience that you get with both of those guys, you feel really comfortable there. I think even at the right guard position, really, you've got Fabechi Wiwu. I think he seemed like the lock in there, but Eddie Pierre-Louis, he could come in, and we've seen a lot of talk about the offseason growth from him. And so I think Eddie Pierre-Louis, whether it be right guard or left guard, he could really compete with either Fabechi Wiwu at right guard or Heath Ozeta at left guard. And I think you could really swap those guys around. And Eddie Pierre-Louis is one of those guys that you feel confident about no matter which side of the line he's at. And he's one of those guys that you really can throw all over. And fans really love him, right? Fans really want to see more of him because he's just aggressive. I remember the clip last season with Fabechi Wiwu and Eddie Pierre-Louis driving a guy into the ground. I believe that was against Maine, if I remember correctly. And, so fans want to see him in there. He really could be shifted around almost anywhere on the line just because he's got such athleticism and growth this past season that they feel comfortable with him there. But I think even if you talk about the right tackle position, I personally believe in Derek Simmons. I think he's just a huge monster of a human being from Western Carolina, the transfer from Western Carolina. You've also got Jake Taylor, who's, in my opinion, the reason why you don't put him in there starting over Derek Simmons is because he's a little bit more injury prone. You look back what he had last season. He was only able to start 4 games last season. So, you've got a lot. And then over at left tackle, I guess I forgot that group out where you've got Jacob Sexton in there. And I think he's the obvious the favorite in that role. But I think Logan Howland is a guy that is right on his heels. So again, competition all around. Whether we feel more confident about a certain guy or not as a fan base is one thing, but there's a lot of competition. And like I said, I think there's a lot of question marks there in that offensive line group. And that's what I'm curious to see is the question marks, I believe, are a good thing because we see the depth there and we just don't really know who the coaching staff is really wanting to put in there, who Bill Bedenbaugh really feels confident about being his front five, that those guys that are going to make or break you in this game of college football, and especially in the SEC. So I think that this is a league that you can't mess around in the trenches. And I posted something out there the other day, just kind of talking because somebody made a remark as if the Oklahoma Sooners just are terrible in the trenches, and that's why they're going to lose games this season. And I just made the remark that I think if you think Oklahoma has been ignoring the trenches, then you haven't been paying attention to Oklahoma football, because this past offseason, I think that last offseason, they tried to make some adjustments in the offensive line group, but last season was an anomaly. That was like the 1 year out of how many years, probably 25 years of excellence in the offensive line. The Oklahoma Sooners are known for the offensive line. That's what it's been for the last at least couple of decades, since 2000 and on. So I look at the offensive line. I mean, they have focused so much. Even last season, I think they focused a lot on the offensive line. It's just you had so many departures on that offensive line that you had to try to fill in some of the gaps, and it turned into what it did. And of course, injuries definitely didn't help. I know we're going to bring that up over and over again, but we're concerned about it, right? So there's so much with that offensive line that they have tried. And again, the reason why I'm excited about the offensive line this season is because of the mix of veteran leadership that you get from there, but you've also got those eager young guys who might have had a little bit of a taste last season because of the injuries. And so I think that there's multiple possible starters in that room. There's multiple guys that could start and have the ability and have the capability of being a starter in that offensive line group. That's what I'm excited about. And, I think another thing that gets me excited is because I know from what I've heard in that offensive line, from inside the facilities, what that offensive line has looked like in spring ball and even some of the growth that they've seen in some of the summer workouts. Now, as we get closer to fall, we'll start to hear a little bit more. And I think you start to feel like you're starting to see it all round out, but you've heard a lot. You've heard me talk about this a lot. And I'm sure you've probably heard others talk about this, or even reading that there is a lot going into it. When we look at this offensive line and how competitive they've been against the defensive line. Again, one of the best defensive lines in the SEC, one of the best defensive lines in the country. And the offensive line has been battling them in a way that you didn't hear about that last season. So I think that's one thing that I'm excited about looking at this offensive line going into 2025. But real quick, before we move on and talk a little bit more about some of the question marks, if you're watching on X, make sure to jump over to the YouTube channel. Just look up Oklahoma VOCFB. If you look that up, if you're not already subscribed, look up Oklahoma VOCFB. Join in on YouTube real quick. We're going to boot X over to the curb. But we do appreciate everybody who is watching on X. Just jump over to YouTube so you can keep on watching tonight. Join in with us live on the live chat and so much more. But as we're getting all of that removed over on X, again, for those who are watching, all chats, we'll try to keep an eye on the live chat, but all super chats and donations will be read on the show. And then, of course, another way to help out the channel, help us keep on growing, help us keep on expanding and doing more. We've got a lot of things that we're trying to work on and things that would be beneficial for fans, something that I think you guys would enjoy a lot. And so if you would, check out our membership tiers. We've got some memberships. Huge shout out to Steve. I see Steve was our first member, and so I wanted to shout him out for being the first to sign up. But we do have a membership program here on YouTube. Just hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, those are two amazing ways to help us keep on growing. So we're not asking for you that you have to do anything more. We're still going to give you as much content as we have before. But joining those memberships, we will try to include some extra exclusives and stuff like that. So just click that link down in the description. You can get signed up, become a member of the channel today, and we will try to make it worth your while. At the very least, what you're doing is you're helping us here on the channel keep on growing and funding some of the extra growth that we're trying to do here within Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football. But let's go ahead and dive into more question marks that we have for the Oklahoma Sooners going into 2025. And I'm going to go to another obvious one. The offensive line was one that was really obvious, but I think the wide receiver group is another obvious one for us to pick up on, because like I mentioned a moment ago, the offensive line absolutely had their issues, and a big part of those issues were injuries. But the wide receiver room was just as riddled, if not even more riddled, with injuries and question marks. And some of what you got from the wide receivers last season, from the young wide receivers, I'm talking like Zion Kearney. There were several others that I think even JJ Hester, you didn't really get their best because they were thrown in there before they were truly prepared for that situation. It's not to say that they're not good talent, so that they don't have what it takes, but there's some freshmen that just have it and they're just ready to go out on the field and compete at the highest level in one of the best conferences. For example, Ryan Williams, he came out as a star last season. Jeremiah Smith, another wide receiver, came out as a star last season as a freshman, but there's not many that are ready for that spotlight or ready for that just being thrown into the wolves. Some of them, it takes them a minute to get used to it. And not only that, but you're also learning a new offensive system, new everything, really. There's so much different when you come from the high school level to the collegiate level. And then, of course, another jump from there onto the NFL. But this wide receiver room, I think I have a big question mark about them because I'm curious about their health. Of course, I think staying healthy after last season's injuries is the biggest question mark that we have, the biggest concern that we have again. But of course, giving some health updates. I know Javonte Gibson, he did have broken bone in his leg in April, I believe it was, this past spring, but he is on track to be ready by the opener, and the availability is kind of unclear right now and what he's doing. I would assume that they're probably not going to have him out there at full speed until it gets really close to the beginning of season, and he might not even show up in game one, and that's okay. That's something that you don't have to be too concerned with that, but if he's not showing up in game two, that's where I'm starting to be a little concerned with him and Jaden Gibson, both Gibsons. Again, Jaden Gibson, he missed spring quite a bit. His timeline's still uncertain, but there's a lot of optimism around both of their health, and really everybody else in that room, the wide receiver room. It seems like everyone else is ready to go, ready to work their way up, and they're running full speed. So those are the two guys that you're missing, two guys that we also expect to be ready by game time, even on week one, being ready. But when it comes to game two against Michigan, I think both those guys are guys that you would expect to see ready to be full speed, ready to be out there on the field again. But one thing that I'm concerned about, one thing that I have questions about with this Oklahoma team, this Oklahoma offense in the wide receiver room, it really isn't the talent. It's just who's going to be those difference makers, who's going to be those guys to really stand out and show themselves above the rest. I think obviously Deion Burks, he's really the only the locked in starter. I guess shout out to my guy Jay and also John over there at Locked On. But Deion Burks, he's the only one that really feels like he's the lock in shoe in. I mean, he can be all over, and I'll talk about that in just a moment whenever I get to the depth chart. But he's really that guy that you can put him anywhere. You can put him at the X, Y, or Z, and you can feel very confident about what he's going to be able to do in those positions. You've got others, the transfers like Isaiah Sigtania from Arkansas. A lot of praise from him. He's shown a lot of consistency and shown a lot of growth even from coming over, and shown a lot of adaptivity. And so I think that's a guy that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. I think I'm hearing a lot about Giovanni Gibson, Jaden Gibson, if he can be healthy. You're hearing a lot about Deion Burks. There's others, but I don't hear, and Zion Kearney is another one that you hear a lot about, but I don't hear so much about Isaiah Satania. And this is a guy that I think is just poised for excellence. And as long as everything keeps on trending in the right direction for him, he's a guy that I really think is going to be big. I think you've also got Jermichael Carter, who's a guy that John Mateer talked about a lot. There's other guys. I think Keontez Lewis is also another guy that you're not hearing much about at all in the media, and that's a guy that I'm curious to hear more about him and to see him on the field, because it's a guy that came from a little non-FBS school that came to a bigger program, and we've heard about stories of these guys that come from really small programs, specifically in the wide receiver room, that end up jumping out there and making a huge leap when they get to a bigger program. And I think he's a guy that is poised for something like that. I think he's very capable of doing something like that. So, I'm curious about who can be that key playmaker. I think you've also got the other young talent like Zion Kearney. You've got Ivan Carrion, who's another guy. Zion Reagans, some guys that played, mostly because of the injuries last season as true freshmen that really weren't ready. But now that they've got some of that under their belt, now are they ready? We've also heard a lot. I think earlier in the offseason, you heard a lot about Manny Choi's true freshman. You've also got Elijah Thomas, a lot of spring buzz around him. And even into the summer, a lot that came out of Elijah Thomas. And so, that's a guy I'm really excited to see. I think he comes out on the field. From what I'm hearing, I have a weird suspicion that he comes out on the field, because I also think there's going to be a lot of rotations, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But, at that wide receiver room, that's where I'm kind of seeing. And I think, ultimately, I think there's a lot of guys that just are kind of unproven in that wide receiver room. It's not really necessarily that we have guys that you don't trust, that you don't believe that will be good, that you don't believe will be difference makers. I'm just curious who can be that difference maker. And I'll bunch in with the wide receivers, the tight end group, because I think the tight end group is another question mark for Oklahoma, that you have a big concern there. Who is the lead tight end? Who is going to be that guy at tight end that's going to be the tight end, I guess, and so I'm really curious here. Of course, we've heard a lot about Jaron Kanak and how he's showing a lot of speed, but of course he's not that big guy. He's struggled some with blocking. Brent Venables mentioned that at the media days, the SEC media days, and so you've heard about him, and so I do think he's going to see some playing time. I don't think he would have transferred over to that side of the ball without seeing some sort of playing time, or at least hopes to see the field. And I don't think we would have heard so much about him if he wouldn't. You've also got guys like Carson Kent, Will Huggins, who both transfer portal additions with some experience, but they don't really have a whole lot of production. You don't really know what they're capable of at the highest level. I do think Carson Kent is that big body, big frame guy that you can really show a lot of confidence in coming in there in your big man packages if you need a guy to block. Will Huggins is definitely another guy that you can trust there. Some younger guys that Oklahoma fans want to see in there is Caden Helms, Cade McIntyre, some, kind of, I guess, program veterans, if you will, but of course, kind of hampered by some of their injuries and things in the past. So, you've got all of this, but you've kind of got just a big pileup in that room of guys that just don't have much to prove. They don't have any stats that you can go back and look at. We know that Jaron Kanak is athletic. We know that what he's capable of in physicality, but we don't know what he's capable of in the tight end room. Carson Kent, Will Huggins, and even Caden Helms and Cade McIntyre, we know that they're good. We know that they're capable of something, but what are they actually going to give us on the field? Because we don't really know what's going on in that room. One thing I will say to put some Oklahoma fans at ease in the tight end room this season is that Ben Arbuckle doesn't seem to use the tight end as often as some schemes do. And I think, you look at what Lincoln Riley ran with Baker Mayfield to Mark Ingram, or even what Oklahoma ran with Braden Willis. I feel like that was another big guy that Oklahoma tried to utilize a lot. You're not going to see that much of a utilization from the tight end group. And so I think with that, you don't have to worry as much about that room as long as they can stay healthy and block, and then they can maybe come in there and those big man formations help block, help in the running game. I think that's the main concern in the tight end room for Oklahoma fans going into this season. For Oklahoma in the running back room, I really don't think there's any concern there. I think Oklahoma fans are excited about this running back room. I think Oklahoma fans believe that they have one of, if not the deepest, running back rooms in the SEC. One of the top. Honestly, I feel like I'm not sure who I would put above Oklahoma without looking. I really don't know, but I think top in the nation, top running back rooms in the nation. And again, that's without doing any kind of research, so don't put me on a stake for that. But you just think of the guys that are there with Javonte Barnes and Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum. Blaylock is another guy that watch out for him. I think I don't know if he'll really see the field this season at all. But if he does, I think maybe in one of these smaller games, you got Illinois State, Kent State, games like that, maybe even Temple, that you could possibly see Blaylock in there and at least see a little glimpse of him and what he's capable of. He's extremely fast, extremely athletic. He can be utilized all over the place. I'm excited for the future with him. I know, and I'm drawing a blank right now too. There's another running back, and I'm sure you guys will throw him in the chat too. There's another one. And I don't know how I'm drawing such a blank right now, but anyways, Jaden Ott is another guy that I know Oklahoma fans are excited. He's the expected number one guy. I don't think there's really anybody that's questioning that Jaden Ott, he didn't come to Oklahoma to be a second string running back. He came here to be the main guy, and they brought him in to be the main guy. It's really his position to lose, similar to John Mateer. So, with that running back room, I don't think anyone is concerned. I don't think there's any question marks about the running back room and how deep it is. I don't think there's any question marks about the running back room and how talented it is. I think the only question marks that you might get out of the running back room is really what the depth is going to look like behind Jaden Ott, because I think you've got really a three-way tie between Javonte Barnes, Xavier Robinson, and Taylor Tatum. I don't think Taylor Tatum is going to be your number two back. I think he is in the running for your number three back. And you're probably going to have Jaden Ott at your clear-cut number one. We'll get to that in a little bit whenever I get to the depth chart. But I think you're going to have Jaden Ott at your clear-cut number one at running back. And then you're going to have Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum. Sorry, Javonte Barnes. Xavier Robinson, Javonte Barnes would be your kind of number two, splitting that number two. One week might be one guy's time to shine, and the next week the other. And then Taylor Tatum, the only way he really jumps into the rotation and you see him consistently is if he has completely put away all of the fumbling issues, because that's the biggest thing for Taylor Tatum. If he's not fumbling, then we have no concerns with him. He's extremely athletic. He's got an extremely high ceiling. I believe the number one running back out of his class. Just a big time guy with all kinds of explosiveness, that speed. He's got a burst. He loves bursting through the hole and finding the gap and getting upfield. And he's also not afraid to lower the shoulder. That's just where the concern comes, is when you lower that shoulder, is it going to pop out? He fumbled the ball several times just in conference play alone last season, and that was a big concern from him. So that's the only way I see him really bursting onto the scene and getting a significant number of snaps. I just don't think there's enough snaps in a single game to split between four backs. And that's the only question mark that we've got in the running back room. It's deep, it's talented, we are confident in it, but who are you going to see and whose role is going to be diminished because of the other three backs? That's what I'm more concerned about. I'm more questioning in the running back room. But again, jump in that live chat. All donations, super chats will be read on the show. We will try to get over to the live chat here in just a moment. But I want to jump over to the defense now and talk about some question marks that we might have on the defensive side of the ball. There is no question that Oklahoma fans feel confident about this defense. I think anyone who's paid attention to Oklahoma in the last 3 years, you know that this defense is going to come and they're going to play, and they're going to be physical. They're going to be one of the top defenses in the country. They're going to be one of the top defenses in the SEC, no doubt. And you know what you're getting with Brent Venables. That's why Oklahoma hired him in. They wanted a guy that's defensive minded. They wanted a guy that's going to focus on the defensive side of the ball, get that defense right, because that's what's necessary when going into the SEC. So, despite the 6-7 season that Oklahoma had last season, the defense, it improved significantly. And even in year 2, you saw a huge jump from year 1. But year 3, that was by far the best defense that Oklahoma saw. And I've thrown out the word elite defense in the past, just because I think if you take this defense and put it on any other big team, any other successful team last season, I think even if you were to give Oklahoma's defense and gave that defense over to a Clemson or a South Carolina last season, if you gave that defense over to an Oregon last season, that is a defense that wins championships. That's the type of defense that can win you some big time games. The defense can't be good when the offense is not even complimenting them a little bit. And so I obviously they weren't. They were better than what the paper says they were. And I think most Oklahoma fans, most people that actually paid attention to Oklahoma, recognize that about this defense. And anyone who pays attention to college football believes in Brent Venables to deliver with his defense as well. I mean, this defense was a defense that was top 30 in scoring and total defense, rushing defense. They were also going against an extremely tough schedule last season, and it's going to be just as tough this season. But you've got an offense that Oklahoma fans believe can complement them very well, if not kind of take over some of the load. So that's one thing. I think there's a lot of optimism with certain marquee players that could really jump out. Of course, the biggest question I think that Oklahoma has on the defensive side of the ball is, and I think outside media members might be questioning this, or even outside fans might question this. Inside the program, or even fans that are close to the program, know that there's really not too much of a question mark about this. But the question mark would be, who's going to fill in the role of Ethan Downs, Billy Bowman, and Danny Stutzman? That's really the biggest question mark that you might have outside. But for those of us who are close to the program, understand this program, and have seen the growth from everyone on that defense, we know that there's guys like Kobe McKenzie, guys like Kip Lewis, guys like R. Mason Thomas, guys like Peyton Bowen, even Robert Spears Jennings. There's all of these guys that have stepped in, and they're all taking part of those leadership roles. And of course, I don't think there's anything to question about the talent that's over on the defensive side of the ball. But I think the one that I have mentioned several times this offseason, the one that I maybe have a little bit of a question mark, is the cornerback position. I do think that there's talent at the corner position, but how prepared are they to be showing themselves? Because you have to have depth in positions like that. And I'm just not sure about the depth. I'm hearing a lot of good things, and I think I'm getting a lot more confident about that depth the closer that we get. But I think you've got, guys, I think your main starters, with both of them being healthy, are Eli Bowen and Gentry Williams, and we have no question marks about how good they can be, but there's question marks about their health, because right now you're starting to hear that Eli Bowen is not going to be participating in full practices right now, and they might be holding off until closer to the end of fall, so closer to game 1, and that's a concern. That's a huge concern, because it sounded like something like when it first happened, don't worry, he's going to be back. They're putting him in a boot more for precautionary measures, and now it's starting to sound like it was a little bit more concerning than what we were really led on to believe. And then of course Gentry Williams, he's an SEC, like an all-time, you're talking like an All-American type player with Gentry Williams. But the big concern with him is the fact that he's missed 14 games the past 2 seasons, probably more than that, really. He's had some injury concern. I won't go as far to say that he's injury prone, but I know that there's injury concern with him. And so, there's some health concerns with both of them. And so they're Gentry Williams is available. And so it's just, how durable is he going to be going throughout the season? That's the big thing with him. And the depth is going to rely on really underclassmen. You don't really have anybody that's an upperclassman, any kind of veteran in the depth chart. And so that's what we're questioning. And you've got guys like Cortland Guillory who were thrown out there multiple times by multiple different media persons. And then you've also got coaches that are bringing him up. Brent Venables, I believe, brought him up at SEC Media Days. And so I think Cortland Guillory, he's one of those true freshmen that you really could see take on a big role. And you feel confident there. But then you've also got maybe Jacoby Johnson, a guy, he took some snaps last season, not too many, but how well is he going to transition? How well is he going to, kind of come in his progression into this season? That's what I'm curious to see. That's what I'm hopeful for him. I think Jacoby Johnson, Cortland Guillory, those are two guys that you love to see at your depth positions, but to lean on them and to rely on them to take over if Eli or Gentry is injured, I think is absurd. I think I was talking about this with JP and Trav over on their show. I believe that was last week. That I think Trav was the one that brought this up. I think you're going to see Kendall Dolby step out there at that corner position if one of them is injured, if either Eli or Gentry is injured. And so you've got some questions there. Of course, I think you've got guys like Devon Jordan. You've got Jeremiah Newcomb. You've got a few others that you could name off that show some depth there. But I'm just curious because, again, it's not that I'm questioning how good they are. It's just that I don't have anything on paper to rely on, and very similar to the tight end position, for Oklahoma this season. So what are we going to get out of the depth at the cornerback position? That's the main concern is the depth there at cornerback. Again, I believe in them. I believe in this defense. I believe in the defensive staff. I believe in the defensive coaches to really get them in those ready positions. But with injury concerns there, that's the one position group that we're kind of questioning. When you go to the rest of the defense for the Oklahoma Sooners and look at it, specifically, I think the defensive end and the defensive tackle, really the defensive line, I don't think anybody's questioning how good they're going to be. I don't think anybody's questioning if there's even depth. I think the biggest question is who are going to be your main key starters all season long? Who are going to be the guys that jump out above the rest? Who are going to be the guys that are your all SEC team type guys? Because you have such a stacked defensive line, and on that defensive line, even into that second level, when you look at your linebacker group and what you've got there, you're so deep in so many positions that I don't even know where to go from there, and who to really pick as the standout guy. Because of course you've got R. Mason Thomas. He's going to be the clear starter, the guy that's going to be all SEC, the guy that's who was all SEC second team last season, or maybe it's second team preseason this season. But he's got a lot of growth potential too, and that's why he came back. He possibly could have gone in the NFL draft last season. He probably would have been pretty late in the draft, but he could have gone, and he came back. Hopefully, you can see some sort of progression with him. I think there's a lot of talent around him. You've got guys. I think Marvin Jones Jr. transferred from Florida State. I think he's going to be a big former 5-star guy that's really yet to show you what he's capable of. You've got PJ Adebawore, who's a third-year guy, I believe, and so a lot of upside. But some of the injuries have kind of limited him a little bit the last couple of years. But he's a guy that a lot of people are talking about. A lot of players have even been talking about PJ and what he's capable of. Taylor Wine, another guy that you're hearing out of that. Who knows? Taylor Wine could really shock a lot of people with how good he turns out to be this upcoming season. And of course, Danny Okoye, another guy. You've got Sammy out there. I'm not even going to butcher his last name because I don't have it written down in front of me to remind me how to say his last name. So, I think Sammy's another guy that you look at that could be that outside guy that really comes in and shocks you, shows you how talented he is. So there's not really anything there on the outside that I think you're you're questioning. It's just more or less who's going to be your main starters. I think R. Mason Thomas is your lock-in guy. But outside of that, you really have a lot of question marks. You got 3 guys that are really competing for that top spot on the other side to try to complement R. Mason Thomas. And of course, you're going to see a lot of rotations there. So you don't have any concerns that one of them or any of them aren't going to be starting. But you talk about that defensive line and how deep they are. I think you think of what Dejon Terry or David Stone. You've got Grayson Halton, and of course Jaden Jackson. You've got so much up front that you can really lean on there, and it's so deep, it's so strong. You're going to be able to rotate them in and out so often that you can keep them fresh, keep them healthy, and you can keep them going. You can keep a lot of pressure there, and of course, again, going into the linebacker room with Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie. You've got other guys like Kendall Daniels that transferred in from Oklahoma State. Samuel Omasigo is kind of grouped into that linebacker crew as well. You've got trying to think of some guys that haven't really been mentioned a whole lot. I think James Nesta, that's a guy that hasn't been mentioned a whole lot in this offseason. And then maybe even Taylor Heim. I think that's another guy that hasn't been mentioned a whole lot, but some guys that you've got in that depth as well that may see some playing time. Again, not a whole lot, maybe similar to what you saw from Jaron Kanik last season. But this defensive line going into that second level, into that linebacker room, there's really is no question marks. Oklahoma is going to be great at those positions. I want to jump over to the live chat really quick just to see who's joining in with us tonight. Please feel free to jump in that live chat. We'll try to keep an eye on it. Right now we've got Clement. He says, a key to the season for the Sooners, the offensive line, receivers, and secondary. If they all improve, we will have a special year. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the offensive line. You just take that offensive line and improve something there. I feel confident in that. If you can get some improvement, and I'm talking a big leap from what you saw a season ago, because it was atrocious last season, right? There was nothing really good to take from last season. Again, other than the fact that you had some younger guys get to jump in there. I think that's why I'm a little more optimistic about that offensive line, because of the young guys that got to get in there and play a little bit. So yeah, absolutely. I think the offensive line is the one that you can lean on. And if that improves, I think everything else improves, because if that offensive line is doing well, then you're going to have a better running game. If that offensive line is doing well, then you give John Mateer more time to sit in the pocket and deliver a beautiful ball to any of his receivers. So yeah, the offensive line is really big. And then correction says Boomer Sooner, right back at you. But guys, please feel free to jump in that live chat. I'll keep my eye over on the live chat. Any donations and super chats will be read on the show. And of course, please, consider becoming a member of the channel as well. That's another great way to get some extra content from us. We're not offering, or we're not going to be shutting down anything for those of you who don't become members. If you just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button every week, that's a huge way. Of course, subscribe button just one time. But you just hit that like button every week and you're subscribed, then that's a huge way to help this channel keep on growing. And we want to do a lot more for you guys for those who become members, though. So if you want to become a member, it starts off at $2.99 a month. Click that link down in the description below. You can see the tiers and see some of the extra perks that are offered for our members as well. I'm going to jump in and kind of talk and give my predictions. I'm really only going to go too deep on most of these. There's some that I might go a little further than too deep, but I really just want to kind of take a look at the depth chart and what we've got for the depth chart. I know I've mentioned some of it already, but let's jump over there, starting on the offensive side of the ball, because I think that's the one that has a lot of ability to be shifted around. Of course, quarterback, John Mateer, it's his position. He is the guy there at quarterback. There's really no debate over that. I am curious to see if they end up working Michael Hawkins in some scenarios. But ultimately, I think the smarter way to do it is to try to save his red shirt. I don't know. Maybe that's not even a concern either. Maybe that's not a concern at all, because you've got Bo Bentley coming in. You're hoping for other depth in recruiting. So, but anyways, when you come down to the quarterback position, it is John Mateer's position. Like I mentioned earlier, the running back position is really all Jaden Knott. Jaden Knott is going to be your lead running back. He's going to be that guy to get you 800 to 1,200 yards. I don't know. It just depends on how often they really rotate these guys out, because I think you're going to see a lot of rotations with Jaden Knott, Javonte Barnes, Taylor Tatum, and Xavier Robinson. The second guy on that list is really going to come down to who's the healthiest. If everyone is healthy, Javonte Barnes, I think, is just going to be that number 2 guy. The way that they used him last season, as often as they put him in over guys like Gavin Sawchuk and even Xavier Robinson last season, or even Taylor Tatum, the way that they used Javonte Barnes last season tells me that DeMarco Murray and company, they all feel confident. Of course, this has been Arbuckle's system now. That's his offense. So maybe there's some changes there. Maybe it's, hey, we recognize that Xavier Robinson had the kind of season that he had at the end of the season last year, and so we want to put him in at number 2. That number 2 spot is open. I'm not saying it's locked in at Javonte Barnes. I just feel like because of the way that this program has treated Javonte Barnes and what he's capable of, he's going to be your number 2 back, I believe. At wide receiver, I'll go ahead and break this down into your X, Y, Z. So your X, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I've really had to pay attention to playbooks and stuff. So your X and your Z are going to be your guys further, kind of your one-on-one guys out wide. And so, that's where I'm going to use those guys. You're going to have them out wide. Your Y is usually more your slot, your guy that's kind of off the ball, closer inside, almost in that tight end position, which you could actually see the tight end roll out to that kind of Y type player this season in Ben Arbuckle's system. Just throwing that out there. But this wide receiver group, I think, starting off with the X, the guy that's going to be your more one-on-one guy, your one-on-one, that's the guy that you want isolated, your X receiver. Sometimes that switches over to your Z, but most of the time your X receiver is the guy that you want one-on-one isolation. I think that's got to be Giovanni Gibson. That's going to be your guy. If he's healthy, I think Giovanni Gibson. I think Jaden Gibson also gives you that possibility. He could be that guy that you want out there with breakout speed. We do have a lot of fast guys. So, that's one thing that I think, when you look at this wide receiver room, there's a lot of speed in there. So I think Zion Kearney is also your guy. So I'm going to put the number 1 and 2 on that X, that guy that you want out there in isolation. I'm going to put Zion Kearney just because of his speed. I think he's going to be right behind Giovanni Gibson. When you come down to that Y slot, this is where I'm really not sure. I think Deion Burks is your main Y guy, although it would not surprise me to see him also taking over that Z spot, which is your outside guy that's bunched over. So your Y is the guy that's going to be off the line of scrimmage in kind of that slot position. I think Deion Burks is your main guy there for the most part, but I think he also switches out to that Z spot, to that Z wide receiver. So when Deion Burks is in the Y, I think Jaden Gibson is going to be your main guy at that Z. And so that's where I see those guys kind of lining up for the most part. Isaiah Satania, though, that's the guy that I really think is going to, when Deion Burks spreads out wide, I think you're going to get Isaiah Satania in there at that Y spot a lot too. And of course, you've got guys like Jacob Jordan and even Zion Reagans who will be kind of helping out in that slot position quite a bit. And I feel like I might be forgetting somebody there. But that's the guys that I think you're going to see the most of this season in that Y spot, mainly Isaiah Satania and Deion Burks. Now at the Z spot, I think if Jaden Gibson is healthy, I think that's his position. Again, he could also go over to that X and be more isolated. Just kind of depends on the formation. But I think you'll also get Deion Burks. I think that's going to be, he's going to be split out wide and inside. He's going to be all over the place, kind of keep people guessing. But then you're also going to have Jaden Gibson. I think that's your main guy out there. I would be very interested to see some of the freshmen that we mentioned a moment ago step in there, but I don't think they're going to be your main go-to guys. You've got Manny Choice. I know that there was a lot of hype around him. I don't think they're going to be the guys that you see very much on the field this season. They're going to hold them off, put them in next season. Now on the offensive line, here's my offensive line starting, I keep on going back, a lot with this offensive line. Left tackle, I'm split between Jacob Sexton and Logan Howland. That's your number 1 and 2, Jacob Sexton and Logan Howland. I think Sexton gets in there in that starting position personally. Then at your left guard, I think you've got Heath Ozeta. Again, Eddie Pierre-Louis, I think he can come in. I think he could possibly take that position. But Heath Ozeta, he has more experience. I think he gets in there at that left guard position. Then you go over to the center position. I think Troy Everett's your starting center. He's the guy that, as long as he's healthy, and from what I'm hearing, sounds like he's doing just fine, and that they're expecting him to be okay. Although I could see Jake Mikula stepping in and possibly taking that spot. Who knows? Because he is kind of healthier. He's a healthier guy. So if something was a question mark with Troy Everett, Jake Mikula is in there. But I think Troy Everett is your starting center. Then you go over to the right guard on the right side of the line. I think you've got Febechi Wiwu. To me, it just seems like the obvious one. I think Febechi Wiwu is your starter there, most experienced there. Although, again, EPL might switch over, might get a little bit of reps over there. I'd also expect to possibly see Ryan Foje step in there and get a little bit of repping, just because we've heard his name thrown out there a lot. I could see him getting some reps, and I'm talking reps in the smaller games, the ones that you're blowing somebody out, you're blowing a Temple out of the water, and you can throw him in there. But Ryan Foje, I think UK Dan could be that guy that be your main backup too. So I'll throw him in there. At right tackle, I think you've got Derek Simmons. Derek Simmons, to me, it seems like the sure thing, putting him in there at the starting position at right tackle. He's a huge human being, and I think he has enough experience where I feel confident with him over at right tackle. I think Jake Taylor could get some reps. He's going to be your main backup there. Jumping over to tight end, I really don't know what to believe here. I think Carson is probably your main tight end, but out of being a fan, man, I want to see Caden Helms in there. And I have heard a lot of good things, that he's made a lot of growth this past offseason. I want to see Caden Helms in there. And then, of course, I don't know how much Jaron Kanik gets in there. I really don't. And I think they're going to have specific formations for him. I think he's going to be lined up more like that H-back position. And so anyways, I think mainly you're going to see Carson and Carson Kent and Caden Helms in that tight end position. Going over to the defensive side of the ball, this is, again, one that I feel like you could mix this around any way you want, and you're probably going to be just fine. But that defensive end position on one side of the ball, I think you're going to have R. Mason Thomas, Danny Okoye kind of swapping in and out over there. I think the other side of the defensive end, you're going to have Marvin Jones and PJ, although Taylor Wine is going to get some good reps. Okay, I'm not leaving him out. I think Taylor Wine is going to get some very solid, some very meaningful reps. But I think PJ, from what I've heard, I think PJ is the other guy. So I think Marvin Jones gets your starting position, and then I think PJ is right behind him, splitting reps with Taylor Wine. Then on that defensive front, that defensive tackle, that interior, I think you got Dominic Williams and Jaden Jackson are your main two guys right there in that nose tackle, D tackle kind of positions there. And then you've got David Stone, Grayson Halton as their backups, being able to transition and come in there quite a bit, and get plenty of playing time. I think you're going to see a lot between all four of those guys. Going over to the linebacker room, I think you're mainly going to see Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie as your Will and your Mike. Of course, Kip being that Will on the weak side, and then so you're then I think to back him up would be Kendall Daniels with Kip Lewis, Kendall Daniels. Although I can see Kendall Daniels also splitting out and getting a little bit of playing time out at that cheetah position. I'm curious to see if he does get any. But then, yeah, anyways, that's what I'm going to see there in your linebacker room. I guess I forgot Sammy also, kind of probably more in that Mike. I think he's been getting a lot of reps in that Mike linebacker spot. And so that's probably where you're going to see Sammy Omosigho. Going over to that cheetah position, obviously that's Kendall Dolby's position. That's like the position created for him, basically, is like the way that I feel. Like that he is the definition of the cheetah linebacker / safety kind of guy. He can play. He's athletic enough to play corner, and absolutely he probably will get some reps out at corner. But anyways, you got Kendall Dolby, and I'm interested to see how much you see out there. If I think you're going to see Reggie Powers come in a little bit at Cheetah as well. With as many guys as you've got over on that defensive side of the ball, with that linebacker capability, that linebacker speedy, athletic linebacker build, I have a feeling like you're gonna. I've heard some that you're gonna hear Reggie Powers as well, but I think Sammy Omosigo is another guy that you're gonna see kind of come in at that cheetah role as well. Then going over to the cornerback position, I think with your corners, you're going to have Eli Gentry. As long as they're healthy, those are your two main guys. And then the backups, you're going to get Jacoby Johnson and Cortland Guillory. I think that's your main cornerback room. Like I mentioned before, Kendall Dolby might have to jump over and play a little bit of corner this season if we have any kind of injury concerns out there, or maybe even just to get some reps out there. So that's going to be your cornerback room, in my opinion. Again, all of this is just me kind of taking stabs in the dark and what I believe will be there. Going over to your strong safety room, I'll start off with the strong safety. Peyton Bowen, obviously your lock-in, your shoe-in there, and then Jaden Hardy right behind him. And then I think for your free safety, you're going to get RSJ, you're going to get Robert Spears-Jennings with Michael Boganovsky kind of stepping in back up to him. And I think Michael Boganovsky has the ability to have the type of year that Robert Spears-Jennings had last season, where he had a really good season. You just didn't hear a whole lot about him because it was mainly all about Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen. That's what you heard a lot about. But Robert Spears-Jennings had a very good season last year. I think he's going to have a breakout season this year, but I think you're also going to have Michael Boganovsky come in there and make his name known. He's a heat-seeking missile, man. I'm excited about him. I'm very excited to see more of him. I think that's all I've got on the depth chart. Of course, special teams, I think you're going to pretty much get what you know there on special teams. But I'm going to jump over to the live chat real quick before closing out, see what you guys have there. I know Clement, he said the battle will be Javonte Barnes and Xavier Robinson, running back number 2 behind running back and Jaden Knott. Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Javonte Barnes, Xavier Robinson, that's going to be your main battle at that number 2 spot in the running back room. But obviously, I don't think Taylor Tatum's going to be completely out of the mix. Who knows? I do think that his main guy is I think he's, man. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how much you're going to be able to put those guys in there when you've got 4 great backs. And Taylor Tatum, his main thing holding them out is the fumble issue, right? So that's what I think is going to be big. SBC Bates says over under on DeMarco Murray playing everyone but Ott. Man, let's see. I guess I'm going to take the under on that. All right. So I don't want – I want Jaden Knott in there the most. That just seems like the common sense thing to do. He obviously came in here for that role. They brought him in here for that role. So, yeah, that's I'm going to take the – I guess depending on how you mean that, I'm going to say under the fact that they're going to put Ott in there plenty this season. But no, I like the poking fun a little bit. He did that a lot last season, right? Kind of throwing guys in there when maybe they shouldn't have. Going over to Heston. What's up, Heston? He says, how do you look at the linebacker rotation with Daniels, Kipps, Sammy, and Kobe? I guess I kind of explained that already for you. So hopefully you got some there. He also said sprinkle of Elijah Thomas. Yeah, that's a guy I'm very high on. I think Elijah Thomas is a guy that I see getting sprinkled in there for sure. I think that's a good way to put it. Especially in those smaller games. Illinois State, I think you might be able to see him out on the field there because you're going to have some of your starters come out. You're gonna have them trying to stay healthy. So for sure, that's a guy I'm very high on. And I'm hearing a lot of really good things about him too, like how strong he's gotten this summer and how much weight he's put on. So excited to see him. Modern Day Caveman, what's up? He says they need to utilize true tight end Caden Helms more. His talents were wasted last season in favor of Jake Roberts, only because he's a hometown kid and played under Luttrell at North Texas. Some of that might be true. I think, for the most part, Caden Helms has been kind of injury riddled too. He's been kind of kept out and kind of hampered from some of his injuries. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Caden Helms, if he's healthy, man, and I'm hearing a lot of good things about him too. Like how excited they are to see him back out on the field and how good he's been doing. So yeah, I think if he's healthy, man, throw him out there. utilize him as a true tight end for sure. So yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. Returners. Heston says returners. He also said Satania and Burks. No, the returners. I think Satania is your obvious returner. He's an explosive returner. Go back and look at some of his highlights at Arkansas. He is your main returner. And then I think on kick return, probably going to see Satania back on kick return as well. You might get a guy like maybe Jacob Jordan back there at kick return. I'm not too sure on kick return. I think for punt return, though, for 100%, you're going to get Isaiah Satania back there. That's your guy. And then Peyton Bowen, you might see him a little bit in there because he's a great, he's a great returner, punt returner. So that's another guy, and we've had him in there before too. So he knows what he's doing. That's your main guy. Let's see here real quick. I see Bishop is in the chat. What's up, Bishop? Big salute to you. He says, one Oklahoma, one family, one heartbeat, and one OU fire. Love it. He's always spitting fire every week in that live chat. So appreciate you. And then of course I see Jimmy Satterfield in the chat as well. So got to give him a shout out. Let's see. One more from Heston. He says, at kick return, he took one back. I could see it. I just don't think so. With his injury concern, I don't know how much of a concern there is anymore. But to me, I think no. I think you keep him out. Don't put him there just because I'm concerned about him getting injury. You've had some injuries in the past with him. Let's keep him healthy. Let's not have him running full speed into defenders or anything like that. But I could totally see that. But anyways, that's all we've got for you tonight, guys. Appreciate everybody jumping in. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join in again here on the YouTube channel live at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on Thursday for our call-in show where you guys can call into the show, join in with me, throw whatever you want out there, man. Let's have some fun because it's the off season. We don't have a whole lot to talk about. So let's intervene with each other. Let's kind of talk a little bit, converse a little bit here on Thursday. Jump in on live on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And then, of course, we'll be back next week as well. But appreciate everybody so much for tuning in. Again, go over and check us out on social media. We're working hard to do a lot more over there, specifically on our X channel. We're trying to work in the Instagram as well. Kind of show us some love there. And of course, if you are looking for a way to support the channel a little bit more, join in the membership program. That link is down in the description below. So appreciate it. Everybody, we'll catch you next time. Boomer.